Hey guys, welcome to this very special episode of TFL Now, because with me as always is our man Anton Wallman, who is our kind of EV electric car expert. You can find him on Seeking Alpha, among other places. And Anton, as always, let's talk electric cars. And I think the biggest news, as always, has got to be Tesla. I kind of feel like we're living through this era of another Steve Jobs, perhaps. And the drama just keeps getting more interesting and more interesting. So, there's been a lot of news about Tesla. First, that they're not hitting their numbers, both in terms of production and in terms of revenue. How's Tesla doing in the third quarter, or how will they do in the third quarter?
Well, here's where the rubber really meets the road, and that is that Tesla has made certain predictions about what it will accomplish on a financial and operational basis for the third and the fourth quarter of 2018. And that is that they are going to be profitable and being free cash flow positive for both the third and the fourth quarter. And as to whether they will be able to achieve those targets or not, that is where the debate resides today. And we will, of course, not know the final answer on that until right about November 1st, when we will see the numbers for the third quarter. And of course, the fourth quarter doesn't come until early February. But that's where it stands right now. And of course, Tesla likes to talk about production because they're essentially coming close to meeting their long-standing production goals of hitting, at least as a first step, 5,000 Model 3 vehicles per week. But the problem is, among others, that there's a gap between production and sales. So there's a pipeline of cars sitting out there on lots, both in the Northern California desert as well as down in Burbank, thousands and thousands of cars and many more other cars sitting distributed all over the country at sales and service and delivery centers. So even though they may be making close to 5,000 cars per week, they are not delivering. In other words, they are not selling quite as many cars as they are producing.
And then the cars that they are delivering, specifically the Model 3, have had horrendous quality issues. I mean, there was just a picture tweeted today where somebody showed that they had a different color insert in the door than the rest of the car, right? The car was white, and then one of the doors has a brown insert in the rear door. Yeah, and that's just a small. I mean,
if that had been the Hyundai Veloster, we would have called it a feature because it is asymmetric, right?
Yeah.
But in the Model 3, it was not meant that way.
No, somebody stuck the wrong color, door insert into the.
So what happened is that until very recently, until the last couple of weeks or so, these were cars that were delivered anyway, and then if the customer notices the problems, they would essentially take them back and they would try to fix them. But we've noticed that in the last 2 weeks in particular, Tesla started themselves preemptively rejecting deliveries. They would call literally sometimes just hours before the customer comes and pick up the car, and they say, look, we just can't deliver you this car. There's an issue. They may or may not be specific about what the issue is. Sometimes it's a paint issue. Sometimes it's some other little issue, a battery, a powertrain. God knows.
There were bumpers that were apparently falling off when they got wet.
Yeah,
all kinds
based on poor design. So if you ran them in 6 or 8 inches of water, then it would get stuck in the back. And if you drove through a puddle of water, then the bumper got ripped off. Little things like that. So there are a variety of issues. But at least now, Tesla itself, I think they're noticing that the cost of fixing these cars is becoming so high that they just can't afford to put them in the consumer's hands. They need to preemptively get their quality up and at least fix the cars before delivery takes place.
Yeah, and the other issue, of course, that people are starting to notice now is that, Tesla promised that the Model 3 would be the people's electric car, right? And some of these cars, especially now the all-wheel drive cars, they're up to $70,000, right? A $70,000 Model 3 is not uncommon. That's a lot of money for a quote-unquote, affordable electric car.
Yeah, the base MSRP of an all-wheel drive Model 3 starts at either 54 or 55, depending on delivery charge and so forth. So that's kind of where it starts. If you just want rear-wheel drive, you can get away with 50,000, including destination. So Tesla's promised that they will start deliveries of the 35,000, which is really 36,000, including the delivery charge, which is mandatory, in the fourth quarter. On the other hand, they keep saying that, well, volumes not really until maybe toward the end of the first quarter. So we'll just have to see here how soon they will actually deliver volumes of those cars, because clearly the profitability, or coming close to profitability, will be harder in the version that has the smaller battery rather than the one that has the $9,000 more expensive battery. So Tesla recently alluded to the idea that they have slightly redesigned the battery pack to try to reduce costs to get closer to the point of getting to break-even economics on the smaller $35,000, $36,000 Model 3 version.
So, not too long ago, Elon tweeted late at night that he's going to take the company private. Now, Henry Ford did that actually, right? Henry Ford did that and basically cut out a lot of the investors in his company. And it was a shrewd business move, not a very nice move, but he said he was going to let his son run the company, and then when the shares, he was going to step away from it. When the shares tanked, through a proxy, he bought them all up and took the company back private. But it wasn't done like in a public way. It was done kind of in a business savvy way. Can Elon find investors specifically in the Middle East to put enough money in to actually take it private again? I mean, we're talking billions of dollars at this point.
Typically when you take a company private, it's called an LBO, a leveraged buyout.
Yeah.
But in this case, you couldn't really do that. And Elon himself recognizes that. He admits so as much in his little blog post from a few days ago. Because Tesla, of course, first of all, isn't profitable, although he says that they will be starting this quarter. But basically, Tesla cannot withstand a debt load, because even if they were to turn very marginally profitable, you just cannot load up this much debt. Until the last quarter or so, Tesla was paying approximately $4,800 per car in just interest cost. And that is completely unsustainable. A company like GM or Toyota, you're talking $35 per car in interest cost. So, clearly the company was over levered to begin with. So what he really means when he says going private is that he's looking for some new investors to come in and provide equity, not debt, but to become shareholders, not owning any new debt.
How much does he own now? What percent?
Elon owns right about 20%, 20/21% himself. Okay. And of course, you've got other employees own a few percent, and then you have essentially large mutual funds and pension funds that own most of the rest, and then you have smaller investors and hedge funds that own the rest. Basically, that's basically what it looks like.
So basically, could he get enough cash to get? He needs to get 51%, right? That's to have control of the company, or complete.
Well, he says he's not going to have control of the company. He says his goal, is to maintain the kind of ownership stake that he has today. He wants to essentially just keep the money that is in the company, and he wants as many as possible of the other shareholders to keep the money in the company, and then for those that have to sell and to take out some of the debt, to get some new investors to come in and provide that capital. That's the idea. The problem is that that's not how it works, because you go private typically at a premium in order to get control. That's why we typically we call it a control premium. That's why he says, well, this can be done at $420 a share, which is higher than the prevailing share price. So otherwise, why would you pay more? Why wouldn't you just go, call up your friendly broker today and just buy it for whatever $300 to $320 instead of paying more? It would makes no sense whatsoever. So when you go private, also there's a limitation on how many shareholders you can have. You can only have about 2,000 shareholders per, essentially government regulations. So getting around all these things, it was very clear that when he tweeted out this thing, he hadn't thought about any of this stuff very clearly. He had some ideas, but he hadn't sat down with like bankers and other advisors and legal advisors to really come up with a structure that would make legal sense. And so that was part of the problem here, is that he just basically blurted this thing out and has set off a firestorm.
Yeah, I mean, now he's facing shareholder lawsuits. He's facing possible government investigations, right? It created more headaches than it solved. And actually, he himself recently said that this has been the worst year business career-wise of his life.
But he says that almost every year. He says that, oh, yeah, he says so. Every year Tesla says a few things like a clock, right?
Yeah.
They say that in the beginning of the year, they say, oh, in the second half of the year, we're going to be profitable and cash flow positive. Almost every year, the company says some variant of that. Almost every year, or every year, I should say, Elon says, I've been working so hard. We're working all the time. It's been the toughest years, like eating glass or walking on glass or some version thereof. So every year, he's been saying all of these things. And now, people with short memories basically don't realize that he is saying the same things yet again. And now, of course, the stakes have now been raised, of course, because unlike 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, the company is now saddled with a level of debt that they've never had before. And, you can only get away with saying these things so many years in a row. And at some point, the clock has to come to us full stop, and the company has to start delivering on these things. And maybe, just maybe, that time is now.
Yeah, I feel like the company is kind of on a knife's edge right now, where not only investor confidence, but buyer confidence is starting to wane a little bit, right? So all you fans of Tesla out there, maybe you're starting to doubt the fact that, you put down money on a product that isn't as groundbreaking as you thought, or isn't as inexpensive as you thought, or isn't being delivered in the timely manner that you thought. And I think maybe, is it one of those moments where the chickens are coming home to roost? But we keep saying that every year too, and it never happens.
Well, so here's the thing. When Tesla first came out with the Roadster, there was no car like it. I mean, they were in a class of one.
Yeah.
The Model S was arguably even more epic than that. It was truly the most groundbreaking vehicle of its kind. To this moment, at least until the last month or so, there has still been nothing quite like the Model S around. The Chevy Bolt comes the closest, arguably, but it's still a sort of a different class. But functionally, it's somewhat similar. Now with the Jaguar starting deliveries in Europe here in September with the Jaguar I-Pace, and then arrives in the United States in November. We will have for the first time true direct head-on competition. Behind the Jaguar comes the Audi e-tron.
Yeah, we're going. I think it's next month or.
Yeah, Audi e-tron, and then the Mercedes EQC.
Yeah.
We've got the Hyundai Kona, which sort of is slightly less premium, but functionally somewhat similar, and the Kia Niro EV. We're gonna have a longer range version of the Nissan Leaf arriving at some point within the next 12 months, hopefully closer to 4 than 12 months, but we don't really know the date yet. And we'll have a Buick coming out probably around the middle of 2019. So for the first time, Tesla will have truly direct competition, and it's essentially here within the next just couple of months, basically.
And they're going to lose the tax credits.
Yeah, so the tax credits, the U.S. federal tax credits, starts to phase out on January 1st for Tesla. There are going to be $7,500 per car through the end of calendar 2018, and then for the first half of 2019, it gets cut by half, so $3,750, and then they get cut by half again for the second half of 2019. They are $1,875, and Tesla was the first automaker in the United States to deliver 200,000 eligible cars, something that happened, probably within hours after the June 30 cutoff that would have accelerated the whole thing by a quarter. So, as we said during the Cold War, it's not a coincidence that delivery took place probably, on July 1st or 2nd.
Yeah.
It was by design.
Of course. So the big question that is, I think, on everybody's minds is, up or down? Is the company going to float or is it going to sink? And I think we're at a very critical crossroads right now. And
I think it's a very financial thing. Basically, it's a combination of profitability, which will indicate to investors as to whether they will pony up more money to pay for more factories, to pay for other investments. And it will be up to a cash flow generation of the company so that they can essentially have a prayer of staying afloat. So those are the two things that I think everybody needs to watch. And I think that the verdict we will see right around November 1st, when they will report the first of these quarters, when they have promised these very specific financial metrics of delivering profitability under a certain accounting standard for the third quarter, as well as what's called free cash flow, FCF, which is operational cash flow, and then you subtract, or I should say add, capital expenditures. and it doesn't take into consideration whether you pay for financing or you get new financing, so it takes that out of the equation. So those are the financial metrics that are up for grabs, essentially, that the company has to meet for the third quarter, and that's what they've promised to do.
All right, guys. This conversation, as always, is to be continued. We live in interesting electric times. Thanks for watching. Remember, check out tflcar.com for more news, views, and, of course, real-world reviews. Thank you, Anton.
As always.
Always a pleasure. See you guys next time. Ciao.